Knowledge without application, in my mind, is trivia. And I'm not teaching trivia, right? I want to teach useful, meaningful stuff. And so it needs to be applied in some way. The biggest idea I've come up with in teaching in the last 5 or 6 years, and it's completely revolutionized everything I've done in the classroom, is 3 levels of learning. Now, I don't know if I should call this 3 levels of thinking or 3 levels of learning. I don't even know if I should call it anything at all, because I've pilfered ideas from the solo taxonomy. So in this video, I want to explain these 3 levels of questions that I use to structure every single lesson that I teach. I think these 3 simple questions solve so many of our problems in education. First, let's go back to Bloom's taxonomy. Just quickly, let's have a quick review. This underlines a lot of what teachers do, and it's what I used to try to figure out in my class with IB Psychology, the IB program. They use Bloom's taxonomy as their assessment model. It's a great conceptual idea, but it fails in practice. Why is that? Well, because there's no real clear distinction between what those different levels mean, right? Knowledge and understanding. You see all those, that pyramid, all those lines are touching between knowledge, is it knowledge, comprehension, understanding, analysis, application, synthesis, evaluation, creativity. Analysis, the idea of breaking something down so you can understand the whole part. Okay, I get that. But then isn't that essentially synthesis? Well, synthesis, bringing in materials from different ideas, but if you're bringing things together, isn't that the putting it back together from the analysis? And then evaluation, okay, strengths, limitations, but how does that look different to what analysis is? And then creative thinking, and it's just, it breaks down in the practical application of assessment, of really distinguishing between surface and deep learning. Again, conceptually, it's fantastic, this idea that we all know there's surface learning and there's deep learning, and we want to get to the deep learning stuff. But it did fail, it falls down. I don't think it's great. And then that's why Biggs and Collins came up with the solo taxonomy. I sat in a PD workshop a few years ago at SACEN with John Hattie, and when he posted the solo taxonomy on the PowerPoint, I stopped listening to everything else. I saw it and I just thought, that makes so much sense. And it was exactly the right time for me to see it, because I'd been trying to wrestle with what exactly does surface versus deep, basic rote learning versus critical thinking in my psychology class look like. I was trying to understand the IB assessment rubrics, and I was really trying to break things down. And when I saw that image, it just spoke to me, and I thought, that makes perfect sense. Right, so we have pre-structural, unistructural, multi-structural, right? You know nothing, you know one thing, you know a few things. And then relational, extended, abstract. It's all right. I've tweaked it a little bit, and I'm yet to talk to Mr. Biggs or Mr. Collis about this, but I would like to at some point in the future, because, well, I think we can get rid of the pre-structural and the unistructural, and let's just start with the multi-structural. Multi-structural, it's not a great word, it's not great branding. Why don't we call this knowledge and comprehension? What this means is you can comprehend an individual unit of information, right? So this is individual units. Knowledge, you can retain or recall an individual unit of information. For example, a key term, right? Anytime we're teaching, we want kids to know words. What do these words mean? What is this thing? And so that's my first level of questioning, is usually what is this thing that we're going to learn about, right? Or what are these 2 things? Okay, just knowing what they are, very basic learning. That's what I will call knowledge comprehension. Comprehension, they'll be able to understand something in the short term, and then the remembering, right? If you can't retain it, if you can't retrieve it, it's useless. This is my green level of question at the beginning of every lesson. Then I get into the orange. That is what I would call, well, he calls it relational. I call it understanding and application. Now, here, there's no question or problem being posed in this diagram, and that's one thing that I've changed. I think that the understanding and application, the understanding is being able to make connections between things, so I know a couple of things and now I can see how they relate to one another. But the application means that we have to apply this to some sort of question or problem. Knowledge without application, in my mind, is trivia, and I'm not teaching trivia, right? I want to teach useful, meaningful stuff. And so it needs to be applied in some way. So my questions, that second level of questioning, which is the orange level of question in my lesson plans, that is what I want students to be able to, the question is designed to get them to make some sort of connections between 2 items. Now, if I use psychology as an example, this is always trying to explain some sort of behavior. Let's say it's hormones. You say, what is a hormone? What is testosterone? What is aggression, right? And you say, how and why does testosterone influence aggression? Now, suddenly, they have to know those 2 things first, then they have to connect them and see how they relate to one another. Then we can get into the third level. This is the deep critical thinking. Now here he calls it extended abstract. This is the idea of applying things. I should say they call it the extended abstract. This is the idea of applying something in an abstract context. But I don't always think that's the only way to show critical thinking. It also might be, that could be showing creative thinking, but I would say, and extended abstract isn't great branding. Let's call it critical and creative thinking. The way I look at this is the ability to question those very relationships that we just looked at, or to apply them in a new context. So it's the applying to a new context, great, but also though, you actually have to be able to reflect back on and challenge the nature of those relationships and understand what they are, or even second guess what are these things to begin with, because that's where we differentiate education from indoctrination. It's really easy and it's very tempting to be teaching our students the values and the things that we believe in, all our beliefs and values and what we want them to run with. But where do we draw the line between education and indoctrination? And especially in this sort of, I hate using the phrase current climate, but let me say current climate, where some people believe that we should be teaching students to be activists. Now, I don't know how I feel about that, but I definitely think we have to be teaching students to be critical thinkers. And to me, critical thinking isn't just about applying what they learn in school. It's about actually critically evaluating the validity of what they've learned in school. Actually going, well, hang on, are you full of is this real? How do I know this? Hang on, you're teaching me this stuff, but all right, I get it, I see that, but hang on a second. That is what I want out of my students, and that's where that red level of questioning comes from. It's always a question that's designed to go back and challenge that very understanding they just had. Now, is it my goal in every lesson to get all students through all those three questions? Absolutely not. And this is a big difference. This is why this is the fundamental thing that underlines my teaching, and this is where I think these three levels of questions in lessons can answer a lot of problems that we're currently facing. My goal in education is not to get all my kids at the same level. That's a practical impossibility, and I don't even know if it's a desired outcome. I'm not trying to get everyone to the same point. It's not going to happen. What I am trying to do is get everyone to learn. Now, if a third of my students come in and they leave being able to answer the green question, you've learned something. Awesome. You came into my class, you didn't know what that thing was, now you do. I've taught you something, I've done my job, that's great. Now, if you were ready, and the kids are ready, go on to the orange question, they're trying to solve that problem. Maybe by the end of the lesson, they bring me their workbook and they say, hey, do I understand this? Do I get it? And there's my chance to give them some feedback. If about another third of the kids, right, can answer that question, fantastic, brilliant. And then I now have space for that extended third who need the challenging, who rely on the critical thinking, right? Then there's space in the lesson for them to be answering that red question. But the goal for me isn't to try to get everyone to be answering the red question. Again, because if everyone's getting to the red, it probably means, well, I've got a really small class, maybe all of my kids have the exact same abilities, that's not a reality, or all my questions are too easy. And so any situation where all my kids end up at the same point, or maybe I've slowed down the extended kids and I haven't pushed them hard enough, that's another way to get everyone to the same level. So any way in which I have the same outcomes for all my kids, I don't see how I've been an effective teacher for all my students in that regard. But the best I can hope for is to get them all learning something. Right, now I hope I've explained that well. I probably haven't. I'm going to flick over to the blackboard here and try to diagram what I've just tried to explain. But I wanted to begin my first video on my 3 levels of learning, because this underlines everything that I do in my course. So much of my lesson planning comes back to, okay, what level of question am I pitching at here? Am I looking at a green level where we're looking at surface, basic, rote repetition of knowledge, real basic level learning, or am I looking at something that's more challenging and extending? When I design my activities, I have to think about this design, these 3 levels of questioning. When I'm writing my resources, when I'm doing research, when I'm trying to figure out exactly the content I want to teach, I have to try to filter it across these 3 levels, and I have to make sure that it's presented to students in a way so it allows them to get from the green to the red. And I tell you this, you can't start at the red. You can't think critically about something that you don't know about. And that's something that we're really forgetting in education a lot. You can't think critically on a subject you know nothing about. And that's where I won't rant about this too much now, but this idea that we need to stop teaching stuff and start teaching thinking is bullshit. You can't think if you don't know. Students can't think if they don't know. Look at the best critical thinkers in the world. Do you know what? I guarantee you, when you think of who you think of when you think of a great critical thinker, they will be immensely knowledgeable in their particular field. And so knowledge leads to critical thinking. This idea that everything's on a phone or a computer so students don't need to know stuff anymore, they can just look it up, is nonsense. That is a plague in education, and it's something here at Teacher Geeks I'm going to be probably ranting about quite frequently, but I just want to go back to the basics. I want to be in my classroom, I want to walk in there, and I want to teach cool stuff. I want to teach things that I think students, it's going to be meaningful and relevant and important to them, and it all begins with these 3 questions. Hey, today we're going to learn, what is this thing? And then you're going to see how they connect to solve this meaningful, important problem, right? And that meaningful and important part I'm going to get to next with an overall framework for my units called Real. I try to teach real units, not Real Rap with Reynolds. Shout out to that guy. I quite like his channel, but real units. And then that's into a broader, bigger model of curriculum, which I'm going to be the themantic model of curriculum, which I'll be slowly drip feeding and explaining through these videos. Got to stop now, otherwise I rant too much. You probably tuned out earlier after the first 2 minutes, but that's it. Green, orange, red, they form the basis of every lesson I ever plan, and I think they can answer a lot of questions. Everything I do from now on will be based around those 3 questions. All right, cheers, thank you. If you like that, please leave a comment. I know I might not be explaining things well, but that's exactly why I started this channel, because I want to get practice at explaining myself so then I can get better and better. And maybe one day I'll do a famous TED Talk. I don't want to do a TED Talk. I don't think I ever want to do a TED Talk. The last thing we need is another frickin' teacher doing a TED Talk. Don't worry, right? Okay, cheers, thanks. So let me try to diagram here what I was just explaining. So level 1 is knowing individual units of information. So we think anytime we're trying to teach something, this is where, what I call building blocks. These are the building blocks of our content. It's often vocabulary, key terms, what is a particular thing. If you'd say teaching a novel, it's often just the plot points of a novel, or language features, metaphors, similes. If you're teaching history, historical facts, who were the famous people, what were the events that happened. If you're teaching, in my other subject, psychology, right? These are the different behaviors, the different variables. In science, different concepts. Think about it for your subject, right? Even if I'm teaching my kids, right? This is the alphabet, or these are sounds, whatever. From any age, this is the individual units of information. This is knowledge and comprehension, level 1. These are the green outcomes in my lesson plan. Now, if I go deeper, I then have to do something with this knowledge, right? Knowing individual facts is just trivia. It's not really useful unless I can apply it and solve some kind of problem. So in my lesson, my general framework is I pose a question or problem to the students, give them the building blocks, and then say, let's figure it out, right? How do these blocks go together to solve this particular problem? And let me give you an example right now. I'm researching and creating a unit called the Rise in Teenage Depression. We're trying to understand why, since 2010, has there been a sudden spike in teenage depression? Why are teenage girls in the 2020s really at risk? So the overall framework for that unit is saying, right, that's the why, right? So things like depression and all the individual risk factors are here. And then we're saying, okay, why? And then the overall framework is, throughout the unit, drop all the building blocks, all the little pieces with that overarching question, and then trying to get them to connect it and figure it out, right? Then we get into the critical thinking. Well, I actually don't need to draw a new diagram here. The critical thinking is challenging these relationships and asking questions about what we've just done here. So the question that I pose and provide, right, hopefully students can come up with some sort of logical explanation there. The next step is to go, but hang on, wait. Does this thing even exist? Do we define that properly? Is that actually really what we're talking about? Was there something that comes after, or can I apply this in a new context some way? Was there a factor here that we didn't consider? Is there something else going on here? Is this going to apply to a new context? Does this always lead to this, or are there some things that might influence the relationship here? There's any number, and it's, again, we're in the abstract, so I encourage you to try to look at this, how this applies to your subject and what you're teaching right now. But this, to me, is critical thinking. This is where we prevent ourselves from indoctrinating our students. This is where we create and teach for them their built-in bullshit detectors, where they understand this. And now I'm teaching something here that's really valid and pretty well supported by research, right? And we're teaching the stuff that we know is legit. Of course, otherwise we wouldn't be teaching it, right? But then the next step is we always have to be getting students to be asking these questions and raising these questions, and to figure out how to second guess their own knowledge and understanding. And that's critical thinking. The application in a new context would be the creative thinking. So that's my 3 levels. This might not make sense now, but hopefully as I give you more and more examples through these videos, it will make more sense. But we have the knowledge and comprehension, individual units of information. Can you define key terms? Can you draw a diagram? Can you label something? The understanding and application. Can you make significant and meaningful connections between items in order to answer a question or address a problem? And then critical and creative thinking. Can you reflect critically on your own understanding of significant relationships, right? Now, again, it's very abstract, but this is designed to apply, and I think it applies to any grade level, any subject. So toy with it, play with it, but the best advice I can give in your lesson planning is 3 questions, green or blue, green, yellow, red. Try to structure your lesson plans, your lesson outcomes, your learning outcomes with those 3 and see how it goes. But when I changed to that, it's made a massive difference. All right, hope that was helpful. Thanks.